Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. So what I'm here today to talk about is a story of an experiment of a group of people in a project try to push the boundaries of ways of collaborating and try to find new way to make teamwork more effective. And it's also a story about some reflection, my reflection after the experiment, about how mob programming might solve some of the challenges that software engineering team can have when working in a project. For example, are we building the right things? Are we building the things at the right time? And are we using the right level of quality? But before I go deep further, let me introduce myself. I'm Francesca. This is when I was about 3 years old. And I've been coding for as much as I can remember. When I don't code, I bake. So if you're interested in my bake creation, or if you want to hear more about what I think about technology, you can find me on Twitter. And as I've been introduced, I'm tech director at ustwo. And for people that don't know, ustwo is a digital product studio. We are about 300 people all over the world, and we have one mission, that is to invent, build, and launch product services companies that have a meaningful impact on the world. And of course, impact means different things to different people, so we adapt our meaning depending on who we work with. So we are a little bit different from a normal agency or digital agency. Our core business is to work with clients, and this is what we do day in, day out. But also we have our own products. Maybe some of you know Monument Valley 1 and 2. We build that. Or Mood Notes or Sway that are more about in the health space. And also we invest in people that wants to build a company. And we do that in different ways, either by funding these people or housing them in our space, in what we call the adventure floor. But as I said, the core of our business is working with clients. We have a wide range of people we work with, and each one of them has, as I said at the beginning, their own interpretation of meaningful impact and their own interpretation of way to impact user experience. But what I found very interesting is that all these companies, and when we work with them, they have two important aspects, very common. One is the meaningful impact, and the other one is working with us in the approach of one team. So our team are cross-discipline, so developer, designer, product, and QA, they work together. And it's very common for us that developer and QA take part on sketching session with designer, so paper and pen, and try to draw what the next feature should look like. We really believe that each one in the team will bring their own experience, their own interest into the table when designing a product, so that for us is very important. But one team also means for us be embedded so much into the client that it's very difficult to distinguish which is the client and which is a person from ustwo. And this is because we really believe in deep collaboration. And deep collaboration comes from also a belief that the collective is the way where you can embrace the real genius and where real genius actually happen. And one of our goals is to actually explore that idea by challenge our way of thinking, try to always find different ways to collaborate, challenge our daily ways of working. So if it's not pairing, what else can it be? And also, as I said at the beginning, we like to include all the different live experiences while we work on a product. And this is the context or the environment in which the idea of mob programming came from and where the experiment started. So let me give you a little bit of information about mob programming for people that have never heard of it. Is when the whole team works on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, and at the same computer. So for some of you, that might be quite frightening, but it's actually a very intense and rewarding experience. And it is about focusing the whole team on the single most important things and problem. And it's about leveraging distributed knowledge when solving a problem. And the concept of distributed knowledge comes from the knowledge that each person in the team possess and that can help in solve the problem. It's quite similar to pair programming in a way of sitting in front of a computer and work together, but instead of being a one-to-one type of interaction is the person on the keyboard and the rest of the team. So there can be quite some similarities and some differences that I will touch later on. So what is our story? So we were working with a client, and they were an education startup. Their goal or their meaningful impact was to democratizing education, and in particularly science, especially in countries where building a science lab can be very expensive. So they wanted to reproduce the same environment of a science lab in a digital world or in a web simulation. So we were at the point in the project where we developed different types of simulation, chemistry lab, physics labs, and so on. And we had 2 weeks before the actual end of the engagement with the client. So we sat there and say, okay, we can spend that refining or adding more feature, or we can actually push the boundaries and say, why don't we add another simulation? And when we said that to our client, he said, can you build a simulation in 2 weeks? And we say, well, we have some ideas. So we gathered as a team. I wanted to put that on the screen because these were the main driver of the mobbing exercise that with me helped to make this happen. So I wanted also to thank them publicly. And we sat down and we said, okay, there is a type of simulation we can build in these 2 weeks. And it's something that is, from a UX point of view, so user interaction, is very similar to something we have already built. But it has some different concept, mechanics, and also some different design assets that need to be included. And we said, okay, that's an interesting challenge. The client was on board with that. And also we said, the team already pair with each other. They know the concept. Maybe they will be also interested in see how that is going to work. And also we realized that people in the team were already thinking about how can they share more amongst developers, because of course, when you work in different stream of features or different simulation, in our case, one developer were taking ownership of a single stream of work. So there was the need, or there was already the intention to share more knowledge. So our delivery coach, Maria, they are real name, by the way. She said, okay, let me send a questionnaire before we start the experiment and see what people think, what people know about mob programming. Are they worried about? Are they excited about? So this is what came out of the survey before even start doing mob programming. So people were quite enthusiastic about the idea of multiple brain working together. They found it as a way to solve a problem quickly and also to solve a blocker quickly, because in theory, you should have all the relevant people in the room. There will be lots of context sharing. That is what especially the development team were concerned about. Of course, speedy development. It will be an opportunity to focus on one single task rather than having multiple things happening at the same time. And also, there was this idea of gaining a better appreciation of other discipline and actually understand the other discipline a little bit better. As every advantages, there were some concern, especially about how does it work when you have 8 people, in our case, in one room, try to solve one problem. What will be the logistics about that? How can we manage to get stuff done? How do you keep people engaged for maybe long period of time? And especially from the development side, how can you go deeper into some technical discussion without feeling that you are leaving out some other people that might not have the same context of knowledge? And from the design side, how they can be integrated into the project. How does this gonna work? So we started actually with just the top one. That was our golden rule. And then we figured out our principles as we were going along. So at the beginning, we didn't have the 5 principles at all. We just started with the golden rule of treat each other with respect, consideration, and kindness. Because we know that everyone were going into this environment or into this experiment a little bit excited and then afraid at the same time. So be respectful and mindful of that. So the first principle we come up with is create our own working agreement. We didn't want to find ourselves following a set of rules and adapting to something that was a little bit clashing with our ways of naturally working. We wanted to find something that was aligned with our core values as a company. Number 2, it was important to keep the team focused in that period of time, how long that might be, and a way to not diverge to other topics. So the way we achieve that is actually having a parking lot board where everything that were coming up from discussion they were having during the session could be put in a post-it and put it in the parking lot. 3, take the turn on the keyboard is very important because otherwise you have the effect of watching someone type that for some might be exciting, for other people might not. And it's also a quite intense activity, so it's good to, again, be mindful of that and change the person on the keyboard. Be present, and these things I will touch a little bit later on. And what was important for us is also find opportunity to reflect on the session, on the mob programming session we had, and find a way to distill some of the principle for the next session. And number 5, I will say communicate, 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 because it's very hard when you have 8 people, like in our experiment, to actually making sure you are all on the same page and you keep everyone in the loop of what you're thinking, what your approach is, and what your idea of solving a problem is. So this is some pictures of some of our sessions, and we actually did it. So result number 1, we managed to develop the simulation. And what was very astonishing for me is that we were able to have small mob programming session of about 15 minutes, following by 5-10 minutes of mini retro, and then carry on for a length of up to 2 hours. So there were quite a big chunk of time. But in that time, we managed, especially when we reach a kind of like plateau of the learning of how to do that, we were able to develop a story, a user story, end-to-end in that 15 minutes. So that was very, very powerful. So as a good delivery coach, Maria, again, she sent the questionnaire straight after and say, okay, how did the experiment go? So of course, we get some very, very quick turnaround. Because we were getting immediate feedback from others. It was very positive not to have a fixed set of rules that someone in a book put it there. It's good that we were able to create the rule as we find it them through the retro. It was good to making decision together as a part of like a really cohesive unit. And also we managed to have actually better working relationship because having 2 hours spent with that 8 people day in and day out was quite empowering. Of course, there are some downs or some things that we didn't manage to solve in that experiment, and it would be very interesting to hear if you have tried and if you have any idea about that. So the thing we really didn't realize at the beginning was that the respect and the kindness is really a big part of the mob programming session. It takes a lot of mindfulness to always remember to be patient, to talk, to describe what you're thinking, what your ideas are. Sometimes we took shortcuts, and that means that at the end, there were some work normally done in the afternoon to pick up some of the things we have said, okay, let's do that for now, and then we will revisit later. We didn't find a way to introduce some of our engineering practice into the process. For example, how does it work with PR? Like, are PR still needed? Is there any meaning of having them? So something we haven't solved. And also, in this experiment, as I said, the user interaction was very similar to something we have already done. So the design input was very limited to just providing assets or some visual representation of how the simulation should look like. So it will be interesting to see if you have a completely blank canvas and you need to build the product from scratch, how that is going to work, if it's going to work. So my reflection, first of all, I really underestimate the power of communication. It's evident when you do pair programming that you should always talk with the other person in the pair and describe what you're doing. But in the mob programming, this is kind of like exponentially grow, because there are other 7 people with you in that team, and you need to like kind of trust each other and making sure you also kind of like are comfortable without knowing everything. You need to give the 5 minutes of, let me just try these things, and then I will explain what I wanted to do. And that, of course, takes a lot of patience from the listener side to say, okay, I will let the person type the things down, and then he or she is going to explain that back to me. And also, I thought mobbing was about coding, and instead it's actually about people. And it starts with a lot of empathy. And of course, empathy can have different meaning. In terms of mob programming, empathy has 3, in my mind, attributes. First of all, really have open eyes and open mind about what other people's solution can be. And this means try to see the world as other people in the mob can see it. Don't be judgmental. It's very easy to say, oh, that solution is wrong. Try to avoid that because, again, there is a person behind the thoughts that might be kind of like emotionally connect to that idea. Try to find an objective way to justify, a way to judge between ideas. And third, making sure you allow time to go into the mobbing session with the best of yourself. Mobbing, even more than pairing, is a way to amplify your emotion. So if you go there and you had a bad day, it's gonna be reflected and influence the rest of the team. And when you go there and you bring the best of yourself, that, of course, has an amplifier effect. Mobbing and pairing, they are very similar, but at the same time, I found them very, very different. Both come with the idea of the person on the keyboard and the other one. Both come with the idea of being more effective when you combine brains to solve a problem. However, in my mind, they are also very different. So, first of all, you don't need to have done pairing to do mobbing. You can try mobbing straight away. There is no kind of like prerequisite. And second, in mobbing, in contrast with pairing, when a person leaves the mobbing session can continue if the team want to continue, where instead in pairing, if a person leaves, it's just the end of the pairing session. And what we found is that it was very important, and again, the mindfulness, that when the person comes back into the mob, you need to allow yourself and the rest of the team to actually bring the person back to the context and making sure they have not missed anything or they are at the same level of knowledge as the rest of the mob. And also the other thing about pairing, lots of people don't like pairing. I met lots of people that say that doesn't work for me, it's not my style, I don't like to talk with another person, I have all of my idea in my brain and that works. Fine, but that make sure that doesn't reflect on mobbing. Mobbing is very different. The interaction with people is different. The intensity I found being very different. And also the way you structure the task and the things to work on is different. So I would say from my own experience, give it a try. And if you are a manager in the room and you are listening to these things and you say, shall I try mob programming or not? The first thing that came in my mind when the team came to me is say, how do I measure success? And of course, it cannot be measured by, oh yes, I will be able to reach double the speed of the team, or the velocity of the team would increase of XXX percentage. That doesn't work, and because, of course, the team needs to go through some learning, and then at that point, when they reach enough knowledge, that the velocity will pick up. So my recommendation or my suggestion for measure of success will be, is my team able to share knowledge? Do I have less time spent on merge conflicts? Do I have less bug in production? So this should be your first metrics, and then move into a more like velocity, traditional velocity measurements. And the other thing is that a question that comes very often, not only about mobbing, but in general about pairing or doing like team exercise to solve a problem, is the infamous question, why 3 or more people needs to do the job of one? And this is because I believe that when you work as a team to solve a problem, it's not about optimizing the single chain or the single element in a chain and try to achieve or optimizing the level of the individual, but it's more about how can I make the feature or how can I develop the story in the fastest way possible. So it's about flow efficiency. And last thoughts, this was an experiment. And of course, I don't think it was the perfect experiment, but it was a way to push our boundaries and to try to find innovative way that we can solve a problem. And of course, I bring the expertise with me and with the rest of the team and try to improve that. But it was also a way to understand if there was a different way, an alternative way, a better way to do collaboration and to manage to have all the people to solve a problem together. And with that, I thank you very much for listening.